I personally enjoy learning the dialects and their history. As you might know, we used to have a class difference as the British did. If you ever listen to one of the greatest presidents, FDR, which is an acronym for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he was a very influential president from the American Depression and through World War II. When you listen to his speeches, you hear a more British accent. America shall defeat its enemies in war or in peace, right? And you're wondering, so what happened? What changed that beautiful British upper class, people from the Hamptons, the New York, Boston, we called that blue blood. What happened? Because in the 50s, suddenly, it became, like I'm talking right now, Americaning. Well, it was the invention of the what? What did people start doing in the 50s? They would have their dinner right in front of this. TV. And so you had this period where in New York City and Boston and all those, there was this kind of upper class, Harvard, Columbia educated people who spoke with more of the, America, right? And on the news you would hear that. You would go to the movies and you'd see the nose, right? Update, right? Southern France. American forces attack with vigor, right? And you're like, what happened? Well, the American TV happened. And suddenly we switched from that upper class New York to the more countryside Scots-Irish. And Scotch-Irish is what is the largest group of immigrants that came to America. They are the foundation of this country. They are the people who escaped Europe, escaped the British Empire, and were the first to have and push Americans to have a revolution against the British Empire because they were the most oppressed, right? Think about it. The Scottish are still trying to get independence, right? Their leader, one of their top leaders is Sean Connery, right? The Scottish people need their independence, right? And Ireland, of course, right? They had a very bloody, and they still do in Northern Ireland. So this was kind of the first few presidents, where many of them were some were English, but a lot were Scots-Irish. So that's when the language changed to what it is today. And if you listen to Irish, their R is very strong, right? From Ireland, right? You don't know how to talk from Ireland, right? Yeah, so we had more of this R. So that's how language changed. But in terms of accents, yes, the people from the middle north areas like Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, even Wisconsin, are all, originally all Northern Europeans. So what are those countries? Anybody know? Northern Europe?
You mean Scandinavia?
Scandinavia, right. And so they have their own pronunciation, yes.
Oh.
Now, over time, it's not as distinguished, but you can still hear it, And for example, we say, oh yeah, you betcha. You betcha means, yeah, I agree. They say that, right? Because they come from Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland. And so, I don't know exactly about the number 10, but it could be a little different. Right? And of course, Wisconsin has a very large German population. In fact, until World War II, it was the second language there. It was German. And so they're famous for beer, and they call, instead of hot dogs, they call bratwurst, right? And the people there have a distinct culture. If you want to see a movie that kind of pokes fun at that, you can see Fargo, which was the Coen Brothers movie. Did you see that? Yeah? It's good movie. It's because you have to understand that area. And then of course in the South there's a distinct dialect, right? And in New England. Now New England, I always say as a joke, for those of you who have a difficult time with the R, New England's better. Like they would say, I park my car in Harvard Yard. I park my car in Harvard Yard. Mac. So there's less of an R, right? Whereas, in New York, where my father's from Brooklyn, he would say, Mork. Hey, Mork. I left, I puak my kua in Harvard Yacht, right? So it's different. It's just very different from place. But these days, it's much harder to see the dialects, right? Is that true in your countries too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Less and less dialect?
Yeah, I think so.
Is there a lot of dialects where you live?
Yeah, definitely.
There are a lot, yeah.
Especially because foreign people, like I told you that my area is pretty mixed. A lot
Right.
of different ethnicities, so they all bring their own accents.
Right.
And while they are learning Serbian, they bring also changes. So that's especially why we have so much accents.
Oh, I'm sure it's very diverse there, right? And in Japan, you have dialects, right? Osaka Ben, right?
Yeah,
Very strong. In Turkey,
Yeah,
there are, yeah? From
A lot.
Istanbul to Ankara, is it a little different or similar?
just some words, few words, not like that much, but for example, like west and east.
Uh-huh, they're
a lot of-
different.
Yeah, they're two different.
Yeah. So like the Kurdish people speak differently, right?
Oh, they have a different language.
Right.
It's not even a dialect.
It's not even,
Yeah,
it's
a
not even
different
related.
language, yeah.
Right. So I hope that answers your question, right? Okay, so the next point in terms of inferences from facts, I think that's very difficult, and that's why this is, of course, for native speakers, very hard. And it's when you really have to think of like a detective. You have to put one and one together. The answer is not there. It's not in the vocabulary you want. You have to make a deduction of reason. In other words, find out what is the answer if you put everything together, right? So, questions of this type ask you to consider factual statements and information. On the basis of that information, reach a general conclusion, okay? A general conclusion, right? All right. And the last point is understanding and following the development of quantitative concepts as they are presented in verbal material. Quantitative and qualitative, those are the two words. Did you ever learn about the difference between
Yeah, one
quantitative?
like with numbers.
Yeah.
Quantitative. The other is more like.
Is more,
Yeah, I learned about this research. Quantity research and quality.
yes,
So
very
I just
good.
know the difference between this research. So
Right. Right, excellent. As you know, we sometimes say it's, in America we value quality versus quantity.
Yeah.
So some companies, they don't have a set hours. They don't have set hours, they don't have, and I always like to use my example working for the marketing education Japanese company, and I would finish at 6 and want to go home, but the Japanese were still there. And sometimes all they were doing is reading a newspaper. But they were in the office and they would proudly tell you in the morning, I was here till 11. I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't feel bad about that. I'm an American. And we believe in quality. If my boss gives me a project, I should finish it. If I finish it early, I'm dismissed. That's what I'm used to. Sometimes that can be intimidating if you're not a self-motivated person. Well, you're spending a lot of time. If you are, it's very good for you. It depends. However, I would say, obviously, quantitative is definitely more mathematical.